So we're going to have some more nano, and at this time I have a non-voodoo microphone, which apparently has been optimized for people with an English accent. Seriously, that's what they told me. Yeah, so they have some microphones there that are especially for people with accents like mine, and they compensate for the teeth as well. Anyway, we're very pleased to have Jim Gimzewski here of UCLA, and he is a nanotech pioneer. And last year, he was one of the co-authors of a paper that appeared in Nature that achieved the interesting phenomenon of desktop fusion, a much discredited idea. And furthermore, it was done using a nanotechnology approach. So we're going to talk about that. So nano and fusion, you've got two buzzwords right there. I mean, that's an unusual combination, though, isn't it?
This one, yeah, this is extremely unusual that one could generate nuclear fusion using something very small. Generally, when you think of nuclear fusion, you're thinking of atom bombs, or you're thinking of, for instance, a tokamak, which is a device which is about the size of this room, not really generating much fusion.
So how do you do it on a desktop?
On the desktop, the way we did it, rather unusual. What we discovered was that if we take a small crystal, this crystal is it's actually found in cell phones.
So it's a pyroelectric crystal.
Pyroelectric.
What does it do in a cell phone then?
I can't remember, but
okay, never
it's
mind.
in cell phones.
But basically, you change the temperature and you get an electric field set up.
Yeah, you change the temperature, set up an electric field, and what we did was attach a small needle to the end that we normally use in a type of microscope that I work with. Introduce some gas, which is deuterium, which is an isotope of hydrogen, commonly available. We have a target, which also contained deuterium. And when we heat it up, basically, we generated a high voltage, which generated a beam of ions, deuterium ions, that hit the target.
So the needle strips the electrons from the deuterium.
Yes,
and
precisely.
then becomes negatively charged and then repels. No, hang on, that would retract them, wouldn't it?
It's actually positive. So the
Okay.
the deuterium has the electron ripped off, becomes positive, and then slams into the target. The deuteriums come together, and if you have sufficient energy, fuse, which generates basically nuclear fusion, and you get neutron emission, and you also get proton emission. There's two channels. So that's what we did.
So you're getting about 1,000 fusions a second, and this has all been peer-reviewed, and so this is, because obviously people have talked about cold fusion before. Is fusion ever cold? I mean, for nuclei to fuse together, they have to be pretty damn hot, don't they?
In the
Locally.
conventional sense, they have to be pretty hot or confined together for a long time.
Right.
Because it's actually a quantum tunneling process, the fusion event. The cold fusion that came from Fleischmann and Pons many years ago was done in a type of battery, electrochemical cell.
Or not done in a type of battery.
Or not done, and that was completely bogus. But
right.
Our work is correct, and it's actually been since replicated by
right.
a group in New York and Troy.
Now, this was the most cited paper in Nature. Who was citing it? Presumably that means most cited by other papers or something.
It was the most downloaded paper
right.
of last year in Nature. So quite interesting. I don't know all the people that downloaded it.
So you think a lot of them might have been nutters then?
It's a field that has attracted nutcases since, I don't know if many people know, for instance, Philo T. Farnsworth.
Right.
One of the
He's a serial
of
entrepreneur,
television.
you could say. A serial con man, yes, who goes around.
But that's the fun of it, that it attracts nutcases, but nevertheless, it's an area that the regular so-called serious scientist that's stuck in a paradigm would never think to approach.
So why did you? What gave you the idea of doing this, and what was the aim?
The idea of this came from several. It actually is a mixture of things. So, it's Seth Putterman. He's in the physics department. He's a friend of mine. He worked on a thing called sonoluminescence, which is a collapsing bubble. When the bubble collapses, it emits blue light, and people have tried to generate nuclear fusion by this bubble technique. And Brian Naranjo, who's a grad student, had developed a neutron detector to essentially disprove.
Because the jury's still out on bubble fusion, isn't it? Or is it not? Do we now know that there's not fusion happening there?
Well, you know, there are people who claim there are fusion, and the people that claim there's no fusion. Recently, Brian analyzed some data where they claimed bubble fusion existed and found that the data is consistent actually with a radioactive source
somewhere else in the room.
In the room. So, you know, I never like to say impossible on anything in the planet, because I think that's one of the problems we have today when we say things are impossible, but there's no clear evidence.
Right, so it's like Arthur C. Clarke says, when a scientist says something is possible, he's probably right, and when he says something is impossible, he's probably wrong.
Maybe.
It's best not to say it. So having built this device then to see whether bubble fusion was happening or not, you then started to, think of another mechanism to cause fusion.
Well, what we did was, you know, I specialize in sharp tips. Part of the nanotechnology research I do since I was at IBM in '83 has been using sharp tips and the emission properties of those tips to generate ions. And Seth found a Russian paper that when you heat up this crystal, you know, it sounds like something magical. And I live in Topanga. There's lots of people with magic crystals up there that you can generate high electrical, you know, voltages. And we had the idea to put these two together to generate actually an X-ray source. And that's what we did. And
so how do you do that? You slam them into a target to make X-rays?
We actually turn, the crystal is an electrical equivalent, a magnet. So we turn it around the other way, and rather than get ions, we get electrons, slam into a target, that produces X-rays. And we did some neat experiments where we could take dental X-ray and film and actually, you know, make X-ray pictures. So then I had the idea that we can make an X-ray source, and I'm working on this, which you can put inside. So rather than take the X-ray, you know, through the tissue, if you put the X-ray source inside, there's no high voltage in this, there's only a couple of volts for the heater, then you can generate X-rays from the inside out. But we discovered that the energies that we could achieve were up to 120,000 electron volts, which is kind of high. It's a big energy. And with those energies, we thought we could generate fusion, but there was this strange, you know, like, this is impossible, but let's try it.
Yep.
And since we had the world's most sensitive neutron detector, we went ahead and...
So this was actually a side effect then of other research into a small portable X-ray source.
Yeah.
And so what have you done with that since, and what applications do you have in mind for that?
Well, since then we have, I have 3 projects. One has to do with the generation of X-rays, and that's something that interests the radiology department, because we can also generate X-rays that can kill things. So we can generate doses for perhaps radiotherapy rather than, you know, put all the beams through at different points to triangulate.
You can have a very local source of
Yeah,
X-rays.
we believe we can put this into a biopsy aperture and endoscope.
Right. So you can make this very small indeed then.
Yeah. And the other one is on energy harvesting with Lockheed Martin Corporation. It's a DARPA grant, also with the city of Palmdale, who have just set up and it's not nanotechnology, but it's sort of high-end technology for the aerospace industry.
So this is ambient energy harvesting, or what kind of energy harvesting do you mean?
Energy harvesting in the upper atmosphere.
Sorry, how does that connect to a small X-ray source?
Well, that doesn't connect. That's another use of these devices. And then there's a third project, which is just I can't talk about.
Okay, so something military then. Fair enough. Of course, what's interesting about this is that it's still fusion. So, I mean, could you make this process more efficient so that you might get more energy out than you get in? Or am I still thinking in the old fusion mindset, which is that this must be a a way to generate energy in 50 years' time, which is what fusion is traditionally thought of.
Well, certainly, you have to realize that this experiment was done with basically no funding. It involved finding a small crystal, which you can buy commercially, etching a small needle. The rest was glue, and the target we got from Los Alamos, but that's nothing special. One can obtain those make those targets. And with that, we could generate nuclear fusion. Now, since then, we have worked out different schemes. Basically, one of the things is to increase the cycling time, which we think we can improve by a factor at least 1,000 or so. And the other is to make many of them, arrays. So at this moment, if you just took the first experiment and you were to put these things, they're about this size. If you were to put them into and it probably cost about $15 each or so, and you put these into a tokamak,
right,
for instance,
yeah,
into the vacuum chamber, you would generate many, many more neutrons than are being created at the moment.
Yeah.
The amount of funding that's gone into it has been relatively little. So what one has to see is when you take this seriously and you put some serious scientific effort into what you could achieve. At the moment, we certainly believe that a neutron generator is easily achievable. And neutron generators are used, for instance, would be the use of that would be airport security, because the neutrons go through the material. They emit gamma rays, and the gamma ray detection, you can tell if you have bombs or material like that. People that use neutron sources are also companies like Halliburton, who in oil exploration would like to have do that neutron activation analysis in boreholes as they're drilling.
So you've potentially
medical
got
applications.
Okay, so you've potentially got an application there of being a neutron generator. What about actually fusion, where more energy comes out than you put in? Is that feasible with this approach at all, or are we still reliant on the tokamak crowd?
It's not. In the present embodiment, it's not. But as I say, I don't like to say things are impossible.
Right. Okay. This is part of. I mean, you mentioned that you used to work at IBM in the Zurich lab, where the STM came out of, and so on. The scanning tunneling microscope. Sorry. So this is. So basically, that was one of these interesting properties of sharp points outcomes. And you've worked in various other aspects of nano. So what other nanotech research are you doing? I understand it's things like single molecule rotors and the use of nano in sensors and so on. What kinds of things are you working on apart from this fusion?
Yeah, well, more, I'm kind of known for working with single molecules and all sorts of esoteric things that probably sound useless. And I used to talk about molecular electronics, and my interests have completely shifted. Now I work very much with the medical school at UCLA, also with the dental school. Work with Colgate-Palmolive on nanotechnology research into the way bacteria are growing on teeth. Also with Iris Diagnostics, which is the largest urine analysis company in the world. And we have a new project, a DARPA project with Stanford. It's a $5 million project, which is on generating a mechanical nose, which uses micromechanical technology. There's the small silicone mechanical devices, which are micron-sized, but where we use nanometer scale motion to analyze things. Now,
this brings us to the the perennial subject of how you define nanotech, because yesterday on the nanotech panel, we heard from our friends at Nanosys that nanotech is different from micromechanical systems.
Yeah.
They're just things that resemble macro systems but are small, whereas nano should not just be about being small, but it should be, the definition of nano we heard yesterday was things that are different because they are so small. But you're actually bridging the nano world and the micro world then.
Yeah, well, I totally, I have been involved since since '86 and debates, you know.
Yep.
I mean, I met Eric Drexler, you know, before he was writing his book on nanotechnology, you know. These endless debates that have occurred in the United States and in Europe and in Japan and, you know, all the places I go about what is nanotechnology.
Do you have a working definition, or do you just
say?
say?
I do. And, you know, let me just say that, you know, today an organic chemist makes molecules, and he's become a nanotechnologist, right? An electrochemist works on batteries to become a nanotechnologist. Everybody's become a nanotechnologist. So they are not nanotechnologists. They are not nanotechnologists. So I could tell you what a nanotechnologist is not.
Right.
But the funding has moved away from their fields to nanotechnology, so that's why they're nanotechnologists.
So it's the opposite of what happened with AI, because what happened with AI was that no one wanted to admit they were doing AI research because all the money dried up. So suddenly they were doing expert systems or you know, heuristics or computer learning, and this is the opposite. Now you stick nano on and you get the funding.
Yeah, and before, if you put nano on the research in the US, you would not be funded.
Right, but now you do.
You are
There's that big pot of money for nano research.
So to me, nanotechnology is it's very much about there's a convergence, and if you're stuck in your paradigm, and everybody is stuck more or less in paradigms, you've had it. What you have to do is think of something that shifts the paradigm. So even though you use something that's micro, if you're shifting sufficiently the paradigm in which you're, you know, of your field, and generating some new shift that is a revolutionary approach rather than just a continuation of evolution in science, then it becomes, to me, nano, and typically involves an understanding, of course, on the scale.
And do you, I think it was Christoph Gerber was one of the...
Christoph,
yes,
yeah.
I've spoken to him about this, and he says he hates the term nanotechnology, and he prefers the term nanoscience, because he says this is really a sort of science that connects all these formally separate disciplines and underpins them, rather than being a field of technology.
Well, the interesting thing is that the nanotechnology, the word nanotechnology, precedes the
field of
nanoscience.
nanoscience. Yeah.
So IBM, when I was in IBM, we called the department nanoscience and technology, not nanotechnology. And most of nanotechnology is vaporware. There is more money made on nanotechnology conferences, books on nanotechnology, and so on, and products, you know,
so that the nanotech...
that are not nanotechnology than nanotechnology. And there is the science, the nanotechnology is the hope of, in my opinion, this economy, the California economy, is the hope for the future, but it requires a fusion. It requires a fusion of new ideas. And, you know, I'm particularly interested in art and science. And
well, you were co-director of this exhibit in LA a couple of years ago called Nano, which presented nano to the public in a very unusual way, basically through art. So what was the idea there? Do you feel that there is a need to explain this to people in a different way from what they're hearing and these endless debates about terminology?
Yeah, well, I hope you guys didn't, you know, yesterday didn't hear about how small a nano was. You know, how small is nano? Well, take a coin and shrink it down and da-da-da. Who cares? Who can imagine who can imagine what it is?
Right.
And why should you imagine what it is? And you can't imagine what it is, and I can't imagine what it is, so what's the point? And all these nanotechnology things that involve using science are a waste of time. So what we did was we had an exhibition which brought together media art and nanoscience, okay? And we got rid of the textbooks, we got rid of the displays, and we gave people a truly immersive, interactive experience where they could manipulate, and with their shadows, for instance, molecules. They could do all sorts of things and be immersed in that kind of nano world. And we had about 120,000 people come to that. Lots of kids, people from South Central, you know, real tough kids. We made the thing indestructible. We had to make it indestructible. Yeah. We even had balls that were made out of bulletproof plastic. They managed to smash those. So it was real fun. And one of the nicest bits was the Jim Lehrer News Hour. It's a TV program here. It was on a Friday, prime time, did a 20-minute segment on the Nano exhibit, and there's a website on the NPR on the thing. So that was real fun, but bringing together the science students and the art students was the best. Because what I discovered was the best creative students in science were the best creative students in art. And now I'm totally convinced, and we have at UCLA now art science as a center, which will be in the new California Nanosystems Institute building, and in the new Broad building, which is the new arts building, where we will bring together artists and scientists to be creative. And one of the things that a friend of mine, his name is Roy Ascott, he's a telematic artist from Bristol, who actually was doing art on the internet before there was internet, essentially, just when it was used by the scientists. He says, you know, what we should ask is what art can do for science, not what science can do for art. And now that is
And what does it do? Is it just PR, or is it actually helping people understand?
No, the PR and all, you know, the nice, pretty graphical picture stuff is a joke. I mean,
so what's the actual takeaway from the
takeaway is to change your brain,
right?
To change your neuronal connections, and it's a very high form of nanotechnology, which involves reprogramming the brain, okay, to be able to be creative after going through university and being trained to think like a monkey.
Richard Dawkins, at a conference I was at last year, suggested that you could use computer games to, we're used to how the world works, you know, the physical scales at which we operate. And he was saying you could use computer games to basically let people play around with relativistic physics or nanophysics and learn what it's like at those low scales. Is that the kind of thing you were doing? And sort of.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding of quantum mechanics, for instance, comes from an experience. So, for instance, when I think about quantum mechanics, I don't actually have a mathematical equation in my head. I just have an intuition, because I've done it for so long, right?
Right.
And it's just marvelous what you can do if you reprogram your brain. And really, this ability, everyone has the ability to reprogram their brain, and very few people do. And this is what the art-science collaboration is about, reprogramming the students' brains. And in a way, that is a nanotechnology.
Well, that's interesting, because nano is, in some ways, a tool for breaking down barriers between disciplines as much as a discipline itself. And you're saying that extends right into the disciplines that we, you know, into art, basically, outside.
Well, I was doing things with the medical people and the bio people and silicon, you know, way back 10 or so years ago, before people were really thinking about it. And now, you know, I'm absolutely convinced that this art-science fusion is the only way. And if you look at technology today, okay, what we see is that the technology and the culture are completely convergent, particularly amongst young people. Technology and culture are identical. So if you take as the root of culture art and the root of technology science, why the hell are the two so separate? You know, and C.P. Snow, you know, he has, you know, talked about these cultures in the past.
So the iPod has solved that problem then?
The iPod is you know, it is also, it's more, I mean, what sells it is advertisement, but also the fact that it's an art.
It's a beautiful object. Yes, Apple has launched this new black MacBook. It's $150 extra if you want it in black. You know, only Apple can do this kind of thing. But there you go. That's how much of a design statement it is. I want a black one, which of course is the color all the PC laptops come in anyway. So just to sum up then, it sounds as though the thing that links together all of the things we've talked about, going back to the Nano-Fusion, is the need for and the scope for nanotech to make people rethink their preconceptions. We used to think fusion was a big, expensive, hot process that needed a tokamak, and you're saying actually for $15 you can do it on a desktop. Is that really, do you think that's what people here should take away from all of this, that nano requires you to completely rethink lots of things?
Well, if I was to think what one thing that I would like people to take away from here is that there is a need for young people in the United States to reprogram their brains to be totally creative, and for the future corporate America, outside of manufacturing, outside to create ideas, we need new ideas, and in order to get these new ideas, in my opinion, we have to bring together artists and scientists to work together on creativity. At the moment, we're still teaching them as if we're producing factory workers, for the assembly line. And we really need to radically, and that is our future. Right. That is the future, and that's my message.
Okay. If anyone has any questions, we've got 3 minutes left, so now's your chance. Do you think this is a particularly US thing? Because, I mean, from the point of view in Britain, it's bizarre. You have to choose at the age of 15 or 16, you have to basically choose whether you're going to do arts or sciences. And then when you get to, so you've specialized at that point, and then when you get to university, you're only doing one subject. So we actually regard the American system where you can do, maths and philosophy and art as actually quite an open system and much more flexible. So
it was very important because each field was not very well understood, and it was basically focused on a different area. Now we all focus on the same area. Even arts is so technologically advanced today, we all focus on the same area. We all focus on the same nano, essentially, whether it be biology, whether it be cells, whether it be microelectronics, and
so just within each field, then, you think...
But now we all focus on the same thing. So why the hell are we in a world where we are all still specializing in things where the world has changed? And that's why there's a need for this fusion, and that's what I do.
Right. Well, we have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, my question is this. Can Nano-Fusion be weaponized, and if so, how? And in what kind of...
you would like to know how to make a weapon out of it?
I'm sorry?
You would like to know how one can use the Nano-Fusion to make a weapon?
Can Nano-Fusion be weaponized? And if so, what kind of applications for weapons?
I'll leave that up to you.
I don't know, neutron beams aren't very good for your health,
Not really. I really, you could imagine different things, but not really. I would rather have it. I'm sorry, I would rather not answer that question.
Is that because you're already considering
no.
this? Okay, sorry not to be able to answer your question there, but that's left as an exercise for the reader, that one. Great, well, I think that wraps it up. Jim Gimzewski, thank you very much indeed.